Okay. Why can't I even see my own screen? Thank you. Welcome back to another episode of Mental Training Tuesday, I think is what I called this. Who even knows what I'm thinking? So we're going to talk today about neuroscience. How you acquire skills and execute skills in what's called the process of motor learning and relaxation. The first cue that I usually give athletes when we're in strength and conditioning, a lot of times in sprinting, a lot of times in power movements or complex skills, where the first thing people want to do is tense up and try and overthink it and try and get it right. First thing I usually say is relax. Sprinting is the most aggressive thing the body can do. Executing really complicated skills in very high stress situations. Why would I tell you to relax?
We're going to go over that right now.
Don't worry, this won't be super neuroscience-y, but we are going to talk a little bit about, again, how the brain relates to and controls its body. So first, let's go over the phases of motor learning. There's 3 phases. The first one is the cognitive phase. You're learning a new skill. Literally, when I give you a pen and say, write your name, and you're learning how to write J with the curve and a line on top, you. When you see kids learning how to write their names, right? They're holding the pen very steadily. They might be shaking a little bit. It's not smooth. You might not even be able to read it. It's very questionable. And what's happening in the brain is the prefrontal cortex right here and the motor cortex right here, it's in the back of your frontal cortex, are communicating. At the risk of oversimplifying it, what you could think it's doing is this part of your brain, which is responsible for making executive decisions, for analyzing things. It's your CEO brain, you could say. This part of your brain is almost instructing your motor cortex. It's encoding these movements into your premotor cortex, your motor cortex M1 is what it's called. Prefrontal cortex, in the later phases, as you progress, gets less active. Instead, your motor cortex becomes more active, and your cerebellum, the very back of your head, this part, this strange looking part underneath, those things become more active. So in that cognitive phase, your brain is worried about things like movement planning, attention, visual analysis, spatial memory. You're having to figure things out, how to write your name. Now, once you've learned how to write your name, you've done that a lot of times, we're going to move on to the next phase, which is the associative phase. In this phase, the teacher doesn't have to come around so often and be like, now, little Julia, you have to do it like this. I'm able to self-correct more. All right, now I know how to move my elbow. I know how to hold the pen better. I know how to curve my J better. And when I mess it up, I'm like, messed it up. It's becoming more smooth. It's becoming more natural to me. It's not such a foreign thing. When you're learning complex skills, it's really important when you're first learning those skills to do it in controlled environments, right? So that's why we take away the ball when we're first learning how to sprint. We take away the competition when we're first learning how to sprint, and we just sprint in a controlled environment. In the associative phase, it's then more appropriate to add in things like context clues, problem solving, competition, things that add a little bit more pressure to the situation, right? Because now it's more smooth. You're not having to focus so much on just executing the skill. You're able to add in some other things. And that's, of course, a very important part of motor learning is being able to problem solve. And now that you're able to self-feedback, you can also be attentive to more external things instead of just your internal cues. Now, the third one is the autonomous phase, or automatic phase, if you want to call it that. And that's near expert or expert level, right? Experts can do things autonomously. Musicians, right? They're not reading the notes off the thing saying C, D, E, F, G. Okay, that's a G, now blah, blah, blah. No, they can just read the music automatic. You hardly even need feedback. You're just doing it in flow automatically without having to over control. There's far less activity here in the prefrontal cortex. There's activity in the M1 or the motor cortex, and then there's a lot of activity going on back here in your primate brain, right? If this is your CEO brain, this is super over analytical. This is your primate brain. Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi, I would say, is optimal for sports performance or music performance or whatever it is that you're doing. But first, be in an autonomous state with that skill in order to not over control it when executing it so that your focus is elsewhere. We have disruptions with that when we start to over control. So if you again, have a skill that you're good at, but you start getting nervous about it, or you're trying to relearn it, or you're not sure about it. You saw something on Instagram, maybe I should be doing it differently. So you try and change things up. Your CEO is now awake for something that your primate brain has been doing. When you have your primate brain on, you can relax. But when your CEO brain is on, you can't really relax that well. You got lots of activity in your prefrontal cortex. And now you go to execute a skill that you have done a million times in your life that's automatic. What do you think is going to happen? They don't need to be communicating so much and so fast and so often with each other for things that are already automatic. And so that can lead to less smoothness, a higher arousal, right? So you might feel a little bit more stressed. You might even go into fight or flight mode. It impairs your skill execution, and you obviously can't get into flow state if you're not again, relaxed. Now, the thing about relaxation, the reason I use that as a cue is, and it's key for things like sprinting and these complex skills, is because you can actually produce more force. You're actually stronger. You're actually faster. You're actually having better mechanics. You're actually at a lower risk for injury. You're able to move more smoothly and more freely and more flexibly. You're able to be more agile and concentrated when you're relaxed, even though that almost seems like counterintuitive, right? You're relaxed mentally and physically, although you're doing something really aggressive and really competitive. When we run like this, or when whatever your skill is, whenever you do it like this, let's say it's a 1 versus 1, and you're running towards the person, well, your arms are like this and your shoulders are up by your ears and your jaw is clenched. So let's say you're going to go cut to the right. I mean, you're not applying force against the ground anyway. You're not aerodynamic. Your body should be rotating, but you can't really breathe right when you're like this. So let's say you go cut to the right. Well, I don't know where you and your little T-Rex arms are going to go, but it's probably not going to be very efficient. You're going to be exhausted anyway. You're going to be getting tired really quickly. So the best thing you can do is relax. Let your brain and body do the work that they already know how to do. Stop taking yourself from this automatic or nearly expert level. Okay, we all know how to run. Maybe we need to change up some things, but from this nearly expert level, and always taking yourself back to the cognitive level every single time you compete, every single time in training, whatever. That's not helpful. That's not peak performance. And again, Csikszentmihalyi would say you're totally robbing yourself of the gift of what is flow state. If you're going to learn a new skill, get into a controlled environment and just allow yourself to actually learn the skill in a controlled environment. And that's where you think about it. And when you're not in that environment, and gradually as you learn through that cognitive phase, you'll get into the associative phase, and then you'll get into the autonomous phase, and that will come with you. Gradually work your way up, right? Respect the reps, put in the rest, and then relax and trust the fact that your brain and body has got it. It's very smart. It knows what it's doing. They always work together, right? And that's why we study the brain and body together, because we can't study one without the other, because they're constantly working together. So allow your brain to do less work. It knows what it's doing, and it will tell your body what to do, and relax.